There's a YouTube channel out there called Cold War Motors, and they take old junky crappy cars. They're located up in Canada. It's kind of fun to watch them, these guys. I mean, they take cars you would never imagine would ever run again, and they make those things run. It's incredible. They have a whole collection of junk that's rusted, and some of them look so bad they just probably should be headed for the scrapyard, but they save every one of them they can. And of course, you know, the gas tanks are all muffed up in them and everything, so they have to use something to supply gas to the motor once they get the motor running. It's more of a hobby. These guys are really interesting. Cold War Motors. If you want to see some of the neatest things you've ever seen, that's the place to go with old cars. And they use a plastic Coke bottle as a gas tank to gravity feed it into there, and they hang it up on a wire or some kind of rod that sticks up that they mount up above the car. I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a minute. And it just basically, you know, feeds out of the bottle straight into the motor. Some of these motors are 6 cylinders and some of them are V8s. Now here he is, he's going to hang it on this rod right here, just like an IV or something, you know. Anyway, that's the way they drive around with the gas, you know, coming out of the bottle. You know, a couple of people have recommended that to me. They said, you know, that's what you need to do. You need to hang up a bottle like that. No, I can't bring myself to do that on the Thunderbird. I consider that, it's neat. It probably works fine for them, but it does not work fine for me. I don't think. I consider that unsafe. Last thing I need is an exploding plastic bottle, you know, because something dripped or leaked or ran down the hose or something, you know. But I saw a variation of this on another YouTube channel. Let me show you that. Now this YouTube channel is called the Corvette Bed. The Corvette Bed. Let me zero in on there and show you that. The Corvette Bed. I'll tell you what, this is his variation of that same type of setup. He took a lawnmower, that goes around a lawnmower, there's your flywheel hole in the center. Now this I kind of like because it's safer. It has a lid you can screw on, it sits down level, and it puts just about as much gas as you need to get the engine going. I like that a whole lot. When I saw that, I said, you know, that's exactly what I need for the Thunderbird, to get the Thunderbird going, so I can get, because the temperature here is going sky high. I need to get it in the garage where I can work on it out of the sun, where I can actually pull the gas tank. And, you know, Brendan, my electronics mentor and mentor in many, many different areas, he said, you know, I told you about this kind of thing, you know, quite a while ago, but you poo-pooed it. Well, I didn't really poo-poo it. I said that I wanted to put a new gas tank in and not do it this way. But wifey came up with other ideas. She wanted the floor done in her dining room. She wanted new doors put in the deck, you know, the French doors. So that put me behind quite a ways. And now the temperatures are sky high. I have no choice. I'm now in a position where I have to get the engine going. And let me show you my adaptation of even this. This is mine. Right here, it's inside this plastic box. And it used to be an old Cheer a soap powder box. You know, you buy the bag, cut the top off, and pour it in there. It had a lid on it. I still got the lid. As a matter of fact, I could take all of this out, put the lid back on, and be right back where it was. Wifey was going to toss it out. I said, nah, keep that. You know, one of these days I might have a use for it. Sure enough. So I went all around to the local small engine shops. I could not find a square tank like Ben had. However, a fella did have one that was almost brand new. It came off a mower. I don't know what he was going to do with it, sitting in the corner, I guess, or nothing. Anyway, he sold it to me. And it's got good strong lips around the outside, which is what I really like, because this thing is not going to go anywhere. Both lips caught the edge of this plastic thing nice and tight, and I used some of that aluminum tape I had left over, not the stuff for the door. I had it left over from something else. I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, the air conditioner. The air conditioner in the shop. And then I just cut it into strips and taped it around, and, you know, taped it to where it would squeeze together, and then hold it tight against the lips on the bottom. And I took a little super glue and ran a clear hose that I had from the vent pipe just down around and into there. So now this is just hanging down in there is all it is. If gas gets blown back up through and it pushes the gas out, it'll go right back into here instead of pouring all over my engine. And then I just took a hose, a 2-foot hose I bought at O'Reilly, and hooked it on the bottom of the tank. Ran it around and put me a new fitting in there. And got that all snugged up and tight. When the time comes, I'll go ahead and take this clamp right here, slide it on down. It'll be nice and tight there. And we'll have a nice gravity-fed fuel tank for the engine when I finally get around to cranking it up, which I hope is, in the not too distant future. It's really getting hot out here. 90 degrees or more, and it's just terrible. The humidity is really rough. I need to get this car out of the carport into the garage to make wifey happy, for one thing, but me too. It's just getting too hot to work outside here. At least in there it's a little bit cool, out of the sun. And let me see, what else was there? Oh yeah, I'm going to need some plug wires, and I'm going to need a coil wire. I'm going to have to pick those up, and I'm going to set the points on the distributor. I asked wifey, I said, do you have anything for me to do tomorrow? It's Saturday today. She said, no, you've been working real hard on the dining room. You got the door all in. I got the door all caulked up and looking real good on the outside. That's what I did all day today. But you got that all done. She said, take a day off and work on your car. I said, okay. I appreciate that, So today's Saturday, tomorrow's Sunday. That's what I'm going to do. It's Mother's Day tomorrow, but we've already gone out for dinner and all that stuff. And so everybody's happy in that respect. By the way, we were going to come up with a name for the T-Bird, if you all recall. Well, some of you came up with White Lightning and things of that nature. I think what we're going to do, none of them really caught my attention. I wanted you to dig a little deeper instead of, the typical name. So what we're going to do is, this car is going to be a woman car, a lady car, and the name is going to be Pearline. Pearline, because in English and in Latin, Pearline means precious. Well, there she is. Easy can do removal. It's brand new. It just wore out. It was one of those rebuild crap jobs. God, it just irritates me to no end. Well, as you can see, I have the old master cylinder changed on the pickup. The pickup is now out of the garage, and tomorrow, if all goes well, we will be bringing the Thunderbird into here. Hopefully driving it in. We'll know more tomorrow. When it rains, there's an old saying, when it rains, it sometimes pours. And this is, now, I just got done pulling the head off our mower to change the gasket. You saw that, those of you who watched the video saw that in the latest Mishmash video. And then the other night we were sitting watching a little bit of TV, wifey and I, and we heard this really weird noise from out in this area here. We didn't know what it was, so I came out the carport door and opened it up. Didn't see anything. And I figured it might have been some car went by, made a funny noise. I don't know. I just shut the door and went back in. Well, this morning I come out, and guess what? I have a flat tire on the other side of the old Thunderbird, and it hasn't even moved from this carport. Now, this is not the original tire that was flat. This is the one on the opposite side. Let's take it off and see what we can find. Well, how's that for a blowout, huh? Holy mackerel. I don't know, somebody must have shot at my tire with a 30-30 or something. That's what you call dry rot, people. Been sitting there for years and years and years in that mud and water. These are steel belted, by the way. These are your steel strands, in case you don't know. She just blew. Isn't that amazing? It's a good thing this thing blew out like it did. Some people say, oh, that's terrible. No, no, no. There's a big positive to this. Had I been going down the road thinking this tire was in good enough shape to drive, and it did that number right there, there's no telling what would have happened. Off into the woods. There would have been no more T-Bird, no more John, no more nobody. Maybe taking somebody with me, which would have been the worst thing that could happen. But, well, I'll have to go in now, sweet talk wifey, and let me go downtown and get a couple of tires. We're back in business. I ran down to Walmart real quick and got one of their cheap tires. This particular tire will eventually become the spare. So anyway, it's up off the ground. I got rid of that old blown out job, and let's just see how long the rest of them last. And I'm going to have to call it quits for today. It is so hot here in Arkansas, and I am bushed. I've been at this since about 8:30 this morning, and it's been, the heat index is close to 100 degrees. Tomorrow we'll get up, we'll go ahead and put our set of plug wires on. I've got to work on the points, which are located underneath the distributor. I want to clean the distributor cap. I want to clean the rotor, which is this black thing right here. I'll show you how I do that. And, you know, there's different ways of doing it, but I came up with my own way. I tested the coil with the multimeter. The primary and secondary are good. The primary, I think, reads 1.8 ohms. The secondary reads 11,000 something, 11,050 or something like that, which is fine. There's no leakage, no carbon trails anywhere, so we're going to let that one go for now, see what happens. They may wind up changing it later, but I doubt it. However, I am going to do something about these wires sticking up here. These, look at that wire. Half the insulation is already missing from it. It's got bare wire. Before I start this car, we're going to fix these up and get these right. This is really flimsy here. We'll get those squared away and get that taken care of. And then I'll have to blow all the oil out of the cylinders. We'll set up our gas tank. And I've got our battery over here ready to go. All I got to do is hook it up. And there's a couple other things. Oh yeah, I got to fill it up with water. There's no water to speak of in the radiator or the expansion tank. And I don't know, we'll just do it as we get to it. How's that? Okay? It's the next day, and we are going to do a full court press between now and tomorrow morning by noon to get this engine running. Hopefully I can do it this afternoon, but I have to stop and take wifey to the doctor. I've already had to go to the vet. I've had to go to the pet spa so I could get Mac, my poodle, groomed. And I've gone up to the small engine repair shop and picked up the head gasket for my mower. I just can't seem to get settled down enough to get going. So we're finally here, and I've got to leave in a little while. Can't do it too long. And I thought I'd show you how to clean your distributor cap. Now this distributor cap right here is not all that dirty, as you can see. It's in actually pretty good shape. However, there is some build up on each of these pins. And now some people, they'll take sandpaper and they'll sand it off. They'll take a knife or something and scrape it off, get it nice and clean down to the metal. Nah, we don't do that anymore. Now, this is 2018. There's a much easier way to do it, and it works far better. We take our little moto tool or rotary tool with a little wire brush on the end, that little thing right there, and we hold the distributor cap with one hand, and then we take this and we can put it on low speed, the lowest speed it has. I have an L there for low, and then we just turn it on, and we just buff each one of these until they're nice and clean. And it doesn't take long. Now sometimes you have a lot of buildup on those pins. It's really heavy depending on how long it's been since the cap has been cleaned. Now you can take a little pick or something and kind of pick it, and that stuff will flake off. The top layer will flake off of that buildup of, I can't remember, just carbon and a bunch of other crap, whatever they call it, I forget. Anyway, once you get it flaked off, and it'll flake off, it'll fall down in the bottom there, and once you get it all done, you blow it out. And then you take your little wire brush and just barely buff it. Yeah, I'm not talking about getting there scrubbing it. You just barely buff it to where it's nice and clean. And you do the same thing with your rotor. You'll notice the top of this rotor is pretty... Let me see if I can back up here a little bit. I'm a little bit too close. The top of the rotor is pretty, right here, this metal is pretty black. And the end of it is pretty black also. So we're going to buff that nice and clean also. When you buff this part, make sure you put your thumb underneath it or something like that to buff it, to hold it up while you do it. So let me go ahead and clean it up. Well, there you go. See how nice and shiny and clean those things are? No more carbon buildup or whatever you want to call that kind of stuff. I forget what it's called, like I said. Not much pressure. Just a whisper of a touch on each one. Just as Bob Ross, the old painter, used to say, 2 hairs and some air. That's what he's talking about, you know. Barely do it. And then, of course, you'll see how nice and clean our rotor is. I probably could use a new rotor. I think next time I go to the auto parts store, I might just pick up one of these. But that's nice and clean also. They last forever. If you keep them clean, just barely brush them. Just barely brush them. Don't grind them. Just barely brush it, okay? Let's take a look at the points. Alright, in the distributor of the old cars, you had what was called points. In this particular case, they're copper. They look like they're pretty expensive points, actually. And you have a condenser that hooks to one side. The other side goes out and hooks to the negative side of your coil, which is this thing here, which is this wire here, okay? Now, the way this thing works is you'll notice that there is a little shaft on here. This is called your distributor shaft. This whole thing is called your distributor. And you'll notice there's high points on it. One there, all the way around. One for each cylinder. And every time this little part of the point right here rides across that high point as this thing is rotating, and it rotates very, very fast, this set of points will open up. Get my screwdriver down here and kind of show you. It's kind of tough to see here. That set of points, now look there to the right, you'll see the points opening and closing. See them open and close? I'm talking about right there, okay? Keep your eye on that. And every time it opens and closes, your spark plug gets the voltage it needs, or the coil gets the voltage it needs to, or the spark plug gets the voltage it needs to fire, okay? And that's the way it works. So what you have to do is you have to set that gap properly. And you have to get this thing here, a high point, any one of the high points on this right here that rides against it. And when you get it right in the center of the high point, this set of points will be open. And then you have to take your feeler gauge and make sure it's the right gap. So you have to find out what that gap is in order to set your points. Now if it's too closed or too far open, you loosen up this screw right here, like that. And you can move this bottom plate, up and down, which will cause the point gap to open or close depending on what it is you need. That's all there is to it, folks. Now there is a lubricant. I don't have any. I'll see if I think I might have some that'll work though. That you put on this cam right here, which kind of keeps this thing from right here from wearing down. It's just plastic. This thing is going very, very quickly. So yeah, it will wear it down. That's what causes your gap to change in many cases. Alright, I think that's about all I can tell you about that. Let me see if I can get it on a high point here. The way you get it on the high point, you take the key on your ignition, you go choo, 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 and it causes this thing to keep going around and around and around and around until you finally get it at that high point. It's a pain in the butt. It's always nice to have someone else watching it while you turn the key. Otherwise, you got to get in the car, out of the car, in the car, out of the car. Or if you have a remote starter button out here, it makes life a lot easier, which I don't have. So I'm going to try to set that gap. I'll tell you what, my curiosity has been driving me crazy, so I went ahead and hooked up the battery. Let's go inside the car and turn the key and see if anything lights up on the dash. Well, nothing's lit up on the dash. I've got the, of course, it's hard to see. But when I turn on the signal light, listen to this noise. I have no idea what that is. Let's see if I go the other way with the signal light. Isn't that weird, huh? Let me see now. Our clock is not working. Our fan is not working, but I think that's to be expected. I think the wire is disconnected underneath the gauge. Underneath the hood. And our radio is not working. Let me see. Nothing is working. Let's see if it'll even kick over. Yes, it does. That's all I care about. I'll tell you what, let's open up the trunk, see if I can figure out what that stupid noise is. I don't know what it could be. Let me move some stuff. some junk out of the way and hit that switch again, see what happens. Well, it's something in there, in that mess in there. I'll have to find out what that's all about. I have no idea. Well, guess what? We got a little bit lucky. When I ticked over the ignition switch with the key, it caused this thing, of course, to rotate a little bit, just enough to where it placed. Let me zoom in here. It put the high point on this cam right where it needed to be on that plastic thing, and if it was just a tad off, I can always kind of do it a little bit with my hand. There we go. Now what we have is a gap, an established gap right here, because this is against there. Now I need to adjust it for 17 thousandths, and I've already pulled out the blade out of my trusty little feeler gauge here. And this one says, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this one said, there it is there, 17 thousandths, 0.017, okay? The book says 17 thousandths, and that's what we're going to test for. Now we stick that little blade down in there. We don't want it loose, and we don't want it to be so tight we can't get it in. See, I can't get that one in. Not open enough. So we need to open it up a little bit more. Now the way you do that is you loosen this screw right here. That one there, just loosen it. No, I didn't say you unscrew it. You just loosen it. And then you loosen this one right here also, see? And that way you can move the bottom plate back and forth, which is independent from this right here. And you stick your little screwdriver down in here like so. Not all cars have this now. And then you kind of twist it. This screwdriver might not be quite big enough, but you kind of twist it. Don't go the other way, John. There we go. See how I can open it up just a tad? Oh, I got that screw a little bit too loose. Let me go ahead and, for those of you who know how to do this, find another video. This is just for those who don't know. Now, keep in mind, not all distributors in the old days had this kind of adjustment there. You had to kind of play around with it till you got it. All right. Let's see what we have now. It looks a little far open. Yeah, it's a little too far open. It's just the way it is. Back and forth, you know. Go ahead and close it up a little bit. Going to be a little bit difficult here. I need to find a screwdriver just the right size is what I need to do. Come on, baby, close up. There we go. Now let's try it again. Still a little bit too far open. Many times I've adjusted points, got it all the way I wanted it, tightened up the two screws, and it closed up on me. I had to start all over again. Just the fun of working on these old cars, man. I just love this part. Messing with them. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Looks like I got it a little bit too tight now. Anyway, I think you're getting the idea, okay? You gotta keep farting with it until you get it just about right. Right about there, I think is going to do it. Yeah, perfect. Now I'll go ahead and leave the feeler gauge in there. Tighten up the screws. You want it to slightly, ever so slightly, drag on both sides of that feeler gauge. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Tighten up the other side. And we're good to go. Now I'll put a little bit of grease on this cam, because this cam goes round and round really, really fast. And you want it, this is plastic, this is metal. You know what happens when those two meet. Friction burns up the plastic over a period of time, even though it is a hardened kind of plastic. Perfect. Okay, we got that done. Let's go get the grease. Now in the process of doing all of this, after you've got them all adjusted and everything, or even before, you can take this and kind of open up those points a little bit and look down in there and see if the points are burned. You've got a left side and a right side. I've already done that, and they look really good. They're not burned at all. They look fairly new. Anyway, sometimes you get burned and deposits on each side. You can take what's called a point file, and you stick it down in there just like I did the feeler gauge, and kind of, you know, take your thumb and kind of press together a little bit, this right here against the file, and go up and down a few times with it and file it flat again. Personally, I don't own a point file. I'll never own a point file. I don't like that idea. I think it kind of sucks. Only in an emergency if you needed it. Better to just buy a new set of points and a new condenser. Put it in and go with it. Forget all that file crap. But, you know, in an emergency, it could work and save your butt and get you home, all right? Now, the grease I plan to use on this cam is going to be 100% silicone and pure silicone grease. And I've used all kinds of greases in my day. I've used Vaseline, yeah, and I've used axle grease. You know, any port in a storm, you know what I'm talking about? But first of all, we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean this up a little. Spray it down in there and get it nice and clean. I want things to look really good. And we'll let that dry for a while. I'll go in the house and have me a cup of coffee. Then we'll come out and we'll apply a little bit of silicone grease to this thing. I hate to keep dragging this video on, but we're going to have two groups of people. Those that say, yeah, keep going, I want to learn more. And then we're going to have the kind say, I wish you would just shut up and end the video. Well, those who want the video ended, see you later. Okay, those who want to stick around, hang in there with me, sons. Maybe we can do a little bit more. All right, let's take a little bit of grease on the end of my finger and kind of smear it around, squish it down a little bit. I don't want a big gob. I'm just going to kind of put it a little bit around there. Doesn't take a whole lot. Just kind of smear it on there, nice thin layer. The grease will collect underneath that high spot on that piece of plastic anyway, so, and then it'll, it'll scrape it off as this thing goes around. That's all you really need. Doesn't take a whole lot. All right, let's do a little side trip here. What I have here is a tack and dwell meter I bought many years ago, and it reads the tack reads the revolutions per minute, of course, of the engine, and the dwell reads what's called the dwell angle. And I bought this in Walmart many years ago. It looks for like, how much did I pay for that thing? It looks like $5. That shows you how long it's been. Anyway, this thing here, after you set your points at the space that they need to be, in our case it was 17 thousandths, remember? You go to the specification chart for your engine, the old-time engines in particular, and you will get the gap of the points, and they'll also give you a dwell angle. And you say, well, what the heck is a dwell angle? Well, look up the term dwell angle. I'll let you do that on your own. Just know that this meter will read that dwell angle. Now, in our case, the specifications at 17 thousandths calls for a dwell angle of 26 to 31 degrees. 26 to 31 degrees for this particular engine at 17 thousandths. And you have two leads. Anybody can use one of these. The black lead goes to ground. Make sure you got a good solid ground somewhere on your motor. And the other lead, which is green, goes to the negative side of the coil in this case, but it would be the wire that leads down to your distributor cap. You know, the wire that leads down to your distributor. Where is it? Right here. Okay, this wire right here, in this case, it goes all the way down, goes into the distributor. See where it goes in? And this one is connected to the negative right here. So I would take the green lead and hook it there. That's it. And then you would start your engine up and take a look at your dwell after you've put everything back together and you've set your point gap. You check your dwell on the meter. And for an 8-cylinder, in our case, let me zero in here, you should be reading 26 to 31 degrees right in here. Alright? Try to get it right in the middle. Once you can do that, now they have the 6-cylinder also, and I think for the 8-cylinder what you do is you double the 8-cylinder reading. Can't remember, I never messed with 4 cylinders very much, but in our case 26 to 31 degrees. Now years ago, the General Motors, they had their distributors in the rear. Ford has always had theirs in the front. Don't ask me why. I like the front distributor a whole lot better than General Motors having it in the rear, because it's easier to get to. But the General Motors had a little door on the side of the distributor that you could lift up, distributor cap. You could lift up, stick an Allen wrench through that door, and it would come in and you could stick that Allen wrench in an adjustment on the points and move the Allen wrench back and forth like that, which would open and close those points. It made life so much easier because if this is not right and your dwell is not right, off comes the cap. You got to adjust your screws, tighten them up, put it back down, and sometimes you got to do that 4, 5, 6 times. Whereas with that General Motors cap, you just stick that old Allen wrench in there into the fitting they had in the points. You just turn it left and right while you're watching your needle. And when you get to your required dwell angle, your points will be set at the correct gap. It was nifty as can be. I don't know why Ford never did it. It might have had something to do with, maybe it was a patented invention or something of General Motors. I don't know. Anyway, when we get all done and we get this engine started, we'll be checking the dwell. That's the position of the switch right now. And we'll also be checking the RPM. All I got to do is flip it. The RPMs are up at the top, okay? That's all there is to it. Nifty little item. This one works perfectly. Has always worked fine for me. Just a little side trip on that. It is about time to go ahead and put our rotor back on. We've got everything done that we can do in there. I also put a little bit of grease on the top of this tab right here, because that tab pushes up against that center pin on the inside of that cap. And it too takes quite a bit of a round and round friction. Just a little bit of grease, just a tab, you know, just barely touch it with your finger, okay? Just enough. Now there's such thing as ignition grease. You can go ahead and buy that, but I think it's just silicone if I'm not mistaken. All right, let's go ahead now. Don't put your grease out here. Put a little bit of tab, a little bit right there. That's it. That's all you need. All right, let's go ahead and put the cap back on. One more thing before putting the cap on, you'll notice that there's a slot right there in the cap. There's a purpose for that. See that screw down there? Right there? This is what's called your vacuum advance, and it looks like it could use changing. I don't know. It looks a little rusty, but I've seen them work practically looking 100 times worse than this, and they just keep working fine. We'll cover vacuum advance later, maybe. But that screw right there fits down in that slot, and that tells you when you have your cap all the way on and all the way down. A lot of people I've seen will put it on there and not realize that slot goes over that screw. And then they'll snap it on, hook up, you know, try to start, they'll snap it on the best they can, try to force it, and then they'll start the car up. And when they do, they break their cap right in half because the rotor comes around and goes bang, you know. So make sure that screw is down there in that slot. See it? It won't move now. It's over the top of that thing. Now I'll just snap the side things up on it that holds it in place, and we'll get it. Let me see if I can do this one by hand. I can usually never do those. I've never been able to do those one-handed. I've seen some guys, they just reach up there and pop them up. But we're done with that for now. All I got to do now is change the plug wires. I got to blow out all that oil, that mystery oil out of those cylinders, change the plug wires, and a couple other things. Look at this, look at that before I do any cranking. So I'm going to disconnect the battery for now. I've got to take wifey to the doctor here in a few. So I think what we'll do, I hate to do this to you, but we're going to go ahead and end this video right now because I want to get it uploaded, and it's already 100 times longer than I wanted it to be. So until next time, I appreciate you sticking with me. I'll try to get the next video up tomorrow. This is John.